Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it shared here on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. The world wants to hear your cryptid and UFO experiences. So reach out to me and let's get yours on the next episode of Uncomfortable. If you haven't yet, make sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. And once you get a chance to listen to an episode or two, please make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you can. That alone is the most important thing you can do to help get the show out in front of more people. And with more people listening, that means more great experiences coming your way. If video is more your thing, then make sure you subscribe to Uncomfortable Podcast on YouTube, where you can get the video version of most shows. If that's where you listen to us, please make sure to click like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified each new release. Take a minute and check out the Uncomfortable link tree. It's the single best place that you can find anything and everything uncomfortable all in one spot. The link for that is down below in the show notes. I've got a great guest lined up for you tonight. Her name is Trisha. And Trisha witnessed a strange light that captured her attention for a good while. Now, the thing that I think is unique about this experience is where she saw it. Cape Fear River. Does that ring a bell? It should. So if you're ready, let's get into this. If you will, please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to Trisha. Trisha, welcome to Uncomfortable.
So this happened to me in May of 2009. At the time, we were renting a house on the beach on the west end of Oak Island in North Carolina. It's near Wilmington. I woke up in the night and I saw something flash outside. I was half asleep, so I didn't really pay a lot of attention. And I just thought it was lightning. So I went in and went to the bathroom, and I came back out and I saw what I can only describe as a plasma in the clouds over the ocean. And it seemed to be in a shape of a ball, but I couldn't really see the edges of it. Um, and it was sort of in the clouds. And so I sat down and looked, just didn't know what I was looking at. But it was sort of a purple and like a hot pink. And I just kept watching it. It didn't move. It just stayed outside of the window over the ocean. And I watched it for probably a couple of hours, and then I fell asleep. I wasn't afraid. Um, I I actually had an odd sense of peace. Um, so I woke up in the morning and I didn't tell anybody what happened. I just didn't really have the words to describe it. Um, it wasn't, I'm like, it didn't look like a UFO. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and Close Encounters was a UFO. And and this was not your typical UFO. There were no, beings or anything. It was just this plasma. And so I felt, like I said, I felt a really odd sense of peace. And I felt like it was important and meant for me to see it, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I didn't know what to tell anybody. And it's a weird thing. And to give a little bit of a backstory, in the year previous to that, we had lost several members of my family, including my dad. And so I was struggling with complex grief. My daughter was struggling. I was trying to look after my mom.
Yeah.
She was everything just sort of fell apart in our
Sorry to hear
life.
that.
Yeah, it was a really rough time. And so I had really been struggling. And leading up to this, to being there, I just kept thinking, something's got to give. I've got to figure out how to deal with this.
Yeah.
So after this happened, like I said, I had this, this very distinct feeling of peace, like it was okay. And after that happened,
Can I
uh-huh.
I know you've listened to the show, and I know you probably know that I interrupt. I get chastised for it repeatedly. But before you get too much further into this, there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. You keep saying that there was kind of a peacefulness to this sighting. First of all, when you saw it and it grabbed your attention, I had an experience about a year ago where it was broad daylight. I was looking outside my living room window, and I saw something that was I've described it as being maybe 1.5 times the length of a crow. But you didn't see any wings. It had a kind of a pointy protuberance out the front, and it kind of had a pointy protuberance out the back. Very narrow, but about 1.5 times the size of a big crow. But at center mass, there was this undulating ball of plasma. And I just saw it briefly as it went crossed between two trees, one tree in one yard, one tree in the other yard. So, I mean, I got, maybe 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds of it to see it. But this thing was not big. It was not huge. When you looked out over the ocean and you saw this thing, did you get any sense of size or possibly distance from you?
I couldn't really tell you the distance because it was over the ocean, so I didn't have anything to, I couldn't tell where it was relative
Sure.
to anything else. But it didn't really look to be very big. If I had to guess, I would say maybe 10 feet.
Okay. 10 foot in diameter?
Yes.
Okay. And when you talk about this this piece, I think you even said you got this feeling that it was okay.
Yeah.
Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more? Is it like a feeling that you were being told that everything that you were going through was okay, or that the fact that it itself was there was no biggie, it was okay?
I guess maybe a little bit of both. I felt, I did feel, like something, about it was making me think, okay, everything's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. You got this. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, up until that point, I hadn't been able to feel that way for a long time.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to go through.
Yeah. It was it was hell. It was hell going through all that, and then everybody around you, is dealing with grief as well. And
Sure.
So, and I'm sort of a take charge kind of gal, and so I'm trying to take care of everybody else first, and then trying to figure out how I can make things better
Sure.
better for me too. And I was really struggling.
All right, so let's move on with, where did this take you then?
So I didn't tell anybody in my whole family. I just didn't, that kind of thing. It's been in the news and in the UFO circle. That kind of experience
Sure.
has really only come forward in the last few years. And the very first time I heard anything about it was just a few years ago. I read a lot, so I was reading Chris Beldsoe's book UFO of God, and I didn't really. I mean, I didn't know specifics what it was about or anything. And when I read it, and I'm like, oh, that's not far from where that happened, where I saw that. It's not far at all. And I'm like, that is really weird. And so I start reading more into the book, and I think I said, oh shit, about 80 times. It was, his experience and his, I guess, perception of it was quite a bit different. Plus, he had a lot of ongoing experiences that he described in the book.
Sure.
And mine was just it was a one time. I never saw anything like that before, or since. And, so, I don't really have any answers to any of it, other than the way it made me feel, that it was like, it was very positive. And, he described in the book, how he felt it was very, it was a positive experience. And, I think that's where, the similarities are, with my experience and his, and being in the same geographical area.
Right. So, like, as best you can, how close was your sighting in relation to where he claimed his?
I'm thinking if I'm thinking of where he described that first, it's probably only maybe 20 miles, if
Really?
that.
Yeah, that's close. So he had his experience in 2007. You had yours in 2009.
Yes.
And then 2022, I believe, is when the book was published.
I think that's right. I know it was just a couple of years ago when I read it.
So you picked this up just by chance, or you
had
just some interest
chance.
in UFOs, or?
I've always had an interest. My mom, when I was a kid back in the 70s, she had an experience herself. Nothing like that. Hers was different. And I've always had an interest, but never thought I'd actually see something. But I've always had an interest in those kinds of things. And like I said, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and close encounters was the thing.
It was. It's funny because this past summer, I believe it was in July, Close Encounters of the Third Kind got re-released at a theater that is in my hometown. And my daughter was in town. So I said, hey, because it had been since, I don't even know what year that came out, 1979, 1980, something like that. I said, why don't you go with your old man and let's go see this movie? I haven't seen it in the theaters for, all these years. And she knows, my son knows that, I delve into this stuff a lot, and they grew up with me always having something about UFOs or Bigfoot on the TV. All of our streaming services were, just chock full of it. But she went, I think she went pretty much to pacify me. But when we walked out of there, she just kind of looked at me and she's like, that was a incredible movie. She said that was, that even though you could tell that, it was dated because of the cars and the clothes and the haircuts and all that. She's like, it really held up pretty well. And she's like, I had no idea this movie was as good as what it was.
Yeah, that was just phenomenal when it came out. I remember being a little kid and seeing it and thinking, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah. So do you mind going into your mom's account? And I guess the reason I bring it up is, one, obviously I'm interested, and I think the listeners will be interested as well. But there does tend to be a tendency of a pattern with family members having experiences.
Yeah.
Like a generational type thing.
Yeah, and it was funny because both my mom and her brother also had a sighting at separate times. But my mom, hers was, I'd say hers was probably in the late 70s. She was coming home from work, and she saw something large in the sky, and it was over top of her. And then at some point, it went in front of her. So it was, it was pacing her, but it was in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just shot off. And she said it scared her to death when it happened,
Yeah.
And she came home and told my dad, and so, that's in my mind, all those years, that's what I thought a UFO sighting was. That's what I thought it was. And, so when this happened to me, I had no frame of reference to even describe it.
Was she ever able to describe to you what she saw? I mean, shape-wise, lights, no lights?
She said it did have lights, and she said it was very large. But she couldn't describe a shape really. Just that, it went in front of her and then it disappeared. It just shot off.
Did she ever say what drew her attention to it to begin with?
She didn't say. I don't know if if she noticed it, out the side at first. She didn't really say.
Interesting. And then you said her brother?
Yeah, her brother. It was around the same time. He was in the car with his wife at the time. And they were on a country road, and he came up over a hill, and there was one hovering over the road in front of them. And so he just slammed on the brakes, and he just stopped. They just sat there kind of watching it for a minute, and the same thing. It just took off and disappeared, and it was gone.
Was this around the same time as your mom's?
It was close to the same time.
Interesting. I wonder if there's anything to that.
I always wondered too.
So you drew several correlations to Chris Bledsoe's experience, mm-hmm. and your experience, and even though yours was visual and at a good distance. What are we looking at here? 15, 16 years?
Yeah, it's been 16 years.
It's stayed with you.
It has. And, even though I didn't tell anybody at the time, I thought about it all the time. And it's really funny because we go to that end of the island all the time. And I think about it. I still think about it, like, frequently. And I'm always, looking over that way to see, see if I see anything,
Yeah.
but, like I said, it was, I, the best way I can describe it is I needed something to remind me that there's something more to life than death and suffering. And I came away with a sense of peace and that everything was going to be okay and I was going to work through this. And so, that, and I think that's why it was so significant, was because of those feelings I had about it.
Do you think that it, and when I say it, I mean the essence of whatever it was interacting with you to provide that? Or do you think just the witnessing of something so unusual, so not something that many people get to see, do you think that could have been the impetus behind kind of shaking you out of that everything's terrible, everything's horrible, everything's going wrong? Did it give you, was it something you felt interacted with you and helped you get through that? Or was it just the fact that you saw something that was wondrous and unusual that made you snap out of it and say, oh, there's more to life than all this?
And it's another one of those things that was a feeling. I felt like I was meant to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know why I think that. And and that's where I went, round and round with it for years, that same thing, it's like, oh, was I just in that low of a place where I was just looking for something, to make me remember? Or, was there some sort of, exchange there? There were no, like some people, you hear them describe, there were words in my head, or there was
Sure.
there was nothing like that. It was just, it was just very positive, and, it really, and like I said, I thought about it every day for a long time. And I just kept thinking, I woke up in the middle of the night and that's what I see.
Yeah.
And and like I said, it wasn't fleeting. I sat and watched it for about 2 hours, I think, is approximately how long. And I actually fell asleep watching it.
That's an incredibly long, sustained sighting.
Yeah. Because, in your mind, you're thinking, oh, I dreamed it, or I did. It's like, no, it definitely wasn't a dream. And like I said, when I first woke up, I saw a flash outside, but I thought it was lightning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, I'm half asleep. I go in, and then as I'm walking back to my side of the bed, I looked out and I'm like, what is that? And I just sat and watched it. And like I said, it stayed in that same area. It didn't move.
Okay, which is a great point. I'm glad you said that, because at any point during the nearly 2 hours that you did watch this, did it exhibit any kind of, did it exhibit any additional flashes? Were there bright strobes that came off this thing that would remind you that that's the flash that woke me up? This, and it's done it again, and it did it again, and
Nothing. Yeah, nothing like that. Nothing like that first flash that I noticed. After that, it was sort of almost like a pulsating. Like it was just a very like I said, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And, I've only ever heard anybody else describe things like that over the last couple of years.
So when you said it was pulsating, I think that I know what you're meaning, because that was a very hard thing for me to describe when trying to tell some of my friends about this thing that I had seen
Yeah.
about a year ago. It wasn't until I was watching a documentary, and I I had seen it when I saw it. I knew I had seen it before, and it was in a documentary or a show about UFOs, or I knew that I had seen a very good depiction of what I saw at the center mass of this object. And it was several months, and I have a smart TV, and when you connect to it's a Samsung, and it's loaded with some streaming channels that you don't have to pay for. Mm-hmm. And in the 3000s channels, it's like 3050 or something like that, and it pretty much Ancient Aliens is on all the time, and there's different alien shows and stuff like that. And I just happened to turn one on. It was a documentary. I knew I had seen it a long time ago, but I just had it on in the background as white noise. I was listening to it, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. And I heard this guy start talking, and I was like, all of a sudden it just hit me, and I'm like, I went into the living room, and sure enough, while he was talking, they were showing this video clip. Now, what they were showing, this undulating ball of plasma light, kind of shifting colors a little bit, not anything major. It wasn't going from drastically red to drastically blue, but those colors were all kind of in there, kind of just undulating around. That was exactly what I saw, but what I saw had a distinctive black point that came out one end and a distinctive black point that came out the other end. And as I said before, it could not have been much more than 1.5 or 2 times the length of a crow. And the reason I keep using crow is because where I saw it, there used to be a very large oak tree at the neighbor across the street. And about 1.5 years ago, they took it down because it was rotting. And those crows that used to go to that tree all the time, till this day, they still fly around the top of that house looking for that damn tree.
Wow.
They were that used to it being there for, God knows. I mean, I can remember being a little kid and that tree being big back then. So it had been around for 50-some years. So I think I know what you're trying to describe when you say this plasma. At what point did you come to terms with being able to call it plasma? What did you see or read that jarred your perception of it and said, yeah, that's a pretty accurate way to describe it?
I think maybe it might have been like on a show or, documentary of some sort. Mm-hmm. But, it was around that same time that Chris Beldsoe's book came out. And I just, I'm like, yes, plasma, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And, because it really did it described it perfectly.
Well, those... I guess they're a plasma ball. You used to be able to buy them at Spencer's gift stores.
Yes.
Where you touch your fingers on it and the electricity would go to it.
Yeah.
It was very similar to that, only instead of only having the electrical looking lines that would go where you touch your fingers, it was like the entire ball was filled with that.
Yes, that is exactly, that describes it exactly.
So you didn't notice like traditional solid color changes. It wasn't going from red to blue to green to yellow. It was just
No,
kind of all of it all mixed together, wasn't it?
yeah, it was kind of purple and pink, with some blue,
Hmm.
it was just, and it, yeah, it was very odd.
So let me ask you,
Mhm.
after seeing this, and you got this this revelation that everything's going to be okay. Was there a continuance of that in your life?
There was, it wasn't just in that moment. I felt like, I really started making progress with my grief. I was able to look at things in a more positive light. Um, I, there were some things where there were certain relationships in my life that were stuck at a not so great place, and I was able to really just push through all that, and it was just, it seems like once that happened, I was able to really to break through, in a lot of different areas of my life.
During those times, did you continue to draw inspiration from that sighting?
I think I did. I think I did in a lot of ways. I just, um, and I think it goes along with grief, especially when you're having to deal with other people's grief. You just feel kind of lost, and you feel like you don't matter. And I really felt like I was saying before, I felt like I was meant to see it. It was meant for me to see it, and whatever that means, you know I don't really have the answer. I don't really have any. I mean, I can't write a book about it, and I can't start a cult. but,
Yeah.
but
Don't start a cult. Don't
yeah,
start a
I'm not
cult.
going to start a cult. But and it is something that I have, over the past, I'd say probably 6 or 8 months, I finally started sharing it with people. Like, I told my mom and told my daughter, I told my husband, and a couple of friends, and I just said, it was the weirdest thing, and I think it's kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool now. At that time, I was just like, okay, people are going to think I'm crazy. They're like, oh, she's crazy from grief, and, go on about their day.
Yeah. So, what do you think? What was it about what you saw that captured your attention for 2 hours? You said it wasn't moving. So, it wasn't like you were sitting there watching it do all kinds of acrobatic aerial maneuvers and zigzagging around the sky. What do you think it was about what you saw that held your attention for 2 hours? And I guess I'll follow that up with, were you surprised that it took you 2 hours worth of sitting there and watching? I mean, did that time go by extraordinarily fast, extraordinarily slow?
It was, I think I spent a lot of time looking at it, trying to make sense of it. It's like I said, when I woke up and there was a flash, I thought it was lightning. And I'm like, is this lightning? This is not lightning. Lightning doesn't look like this,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just like in my mind, because I'm kind of a sciencey person. And I kept thinking, what could this be? Is this, is it, oh, it's just lightning in the clouds. It's like, no, the clouds are moving. This is not moving.
Yeah.
So I'm really just trying to, I was trying to say, there's got to be an explanation for this. And, I sat there for 2 hours and I have no explanation, and, it was just, it was the most unusual thing that I've ever had happen in my whole life.
Is that typical for you? Can you get lost in things that like moments of relaxation? Is that typical for you to be able to just relax and sit and stare at something for that long? Or
No.
was it that extraordinary?
That extraordinary. That's what, I'm one, my mind's always going. My mind's always going a million miles an hour. What's going on? I'm trying to think, 2 steps ahead. And I think that's, I was a single mother for a very long time, and I had a daughter that played sports, and I didn't have any family support close by, so I was busy all the time. I was always,
Constantly on the
problem
go.
solving.
Yeah.
On the go, yeah. And and I think that was I was really struggling at that time, because everything kind of fell apart, and so my mind was constantly racing. So I felt like for a while when I was watching it, I was trying to say, this isn't happening, this can't be happening, or there's got to be an explanation. And then finally I just sort of sunk down and said, okay, well, let's just watch it until I can't watch it anymore. I just kind of gave up and said, I don't know, I have no, I have no idea what this is.
Do you recall at all during the time you were watching it? Do you recall ever like having clouds pass in front of it that would indicate that it was a long ways off? Or
well, I could see like some of the lower clouds, because a lot of times, especially at that time of year, a lot of times there'll be some fog, or some mist, or some low clouds.
When again? What time of year was this again?
It was in May.
Okay.
So, just because of the difference in the water and air temperature, and things like that. So I could see some little wispy clouds, or, some fog rolling a little bit. And then it would clear up, so, it wasn't moving. And that's where, that was where I was like, oh, it's got to be lightning. It's like, no, it's not lightning. It's not moving. I could see clouds moving, but I couldn't see that moving.
Again, not to belabor the point, but did anything pass in front of it? And I guess the point I'm getting at is, and believe me, I'm not trying to poke holes in your story at all. I have a good buddy of mine who a couple of times now has sent me a text message and says, dude, go outside and look towards the airport. And I'll go out and I'll look towards the airport, and there's this very bright light, but it's Venus.
Oh, yeah.
So, but when clouds move past it, it blocks it out.
Yeah.
And it sounds like to me, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, that if you're not seeing that in this 2-hour span that you were watching this object, then to me that indicates that this was much lower in our atmosphere, in our sky, not out in the atmosphere or beyond.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I'm a sciencey person, and I like astronomy. I like to go out and look at the stars, and this, it definitely wasn't a star. But it wasn't the moon, and it wasn't, like I said, I spent a lot of time trying to debunk it. Like, what am I seeing here? And I couldn't come up with anything.
Interesting. So let me ask you, and please forgive me if this is too personal. If you don't want to discuss it, then feel free to say pass. But you indicated you were going through a lot of things. as far as your religious beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
from what you were at that point to what you were after that, did it change?
I think it did change. I, I've never been super religious, but I think I've been, a spiritual person,
Mm.
but I'm open-minded. Um, so, but I think when that happened after that, and like I said, I just got this, like I'm supposed to see this, and I just felt, I felt important. I'm important to something, to something. I don't know what that thing is. I don't know what label to put on it.
Mm.
But I felt like I mattered, if that makes any sense.
What does your gut tell you that it was?
I
Like deep down, strip away all the I'm a sciencey gal, just boil it down. You had to have had a couple of moments where you were like, shit, that was, what was it?
I felt like it was whatever it is that is the good things, all the good things. I felt like it was, you know, it was some sort of reminder to me that, hey, there's a whole lot more. There's a whole lot more to things, and there's a lot of good stuff.
After reading Bledsoe's account, and in the book, in any podcast that he appears on, he makes absolutely no bones about his faith in Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And he does tend to, and I'm not saying that it's not warranted, but he does tend to lean towards it being of God. Do you feel the same?
Well, I think I do in a lot of ways. But like with everything, everybody, everybody's perception is based on, what they believe, what they feel, what they know,
Exactly. Yeah.
all their experiences. So I think if I were of a certain philosophy, I would have called it one thing. If I were from another philosophy, I would have called it something else.
Sure.
But I think that probably does play into how he experienced it.
Yeah.
But so I would have to agree on that. It was something, it was something more divine. It was something very, very positive.
Sure. And what has it done for you in the years past, in the years since, I should say? Does it continue to shape how you view things?
I think it does. You know, I I think there were a lot of things, that I was struggling with at that time, in addition to all the other things that were happening. Um, I felt like I didn't have a lot of clarity. And it seemed like after that happened and I started really coming out of it, I had a lot of clarity on a lot of things that I never did before. And I felt like it just, my life went in a very positive direction.
Would you attribute a spiritual awakening to having seen this?
I think that's a fair description. Yeah.
You're not the only one.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's nice about this is I think a lot of people can say the same thing. Like, I don't think, I don't mean to say this weird. I don't think I'm anything special. I think there's a lot of people who have seen things like this that have, that it's really changed how they view things, and, in a good way.
Mm-hmm. I have to say that if you've listened to the show for any length of time, excuse me, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you'll know that I have had several experiences with a lot of different things. And save but a few, the vast majority of the experiences I've had, I would have to say, have been remarkably positive and altering in the fact that I think it's made me much more open-minded to just how significantly more great things are in this world than not.
Yes, that very much describes how I feel about it too.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to be woke up from a sleep by a flash. Didn't see any more flashes for the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
You sit there and are just totally captivated by this object. Were there any, because everything you've talked about now has been kind of on the mental plane, as far as what you healed from, what you got through. Was there any physiological effects or healings or anything substantive that you can point to?
Well, one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, in Chris Bledsoe's book, he had talked about autoimmune disease, and I have lupus. And it's one of those diseases that kind of, you have good times and then you have flares and you can get really, really sick.
Sure.
But I just thought it was really interesting. And, autoimmune diseases I think they're more diagnosed now. But still, they're not super common. And I just thought that was really unusual, that, he had described that also. At that time, I was really struggling, with my body, on top of all that other stress, the physical stress of being sick.
Yeah. In your heart of hearts, do you think that experience aided you in it?
I think that a lot of the, I don't know if it was that specifically or just the effect, that it had on all these other areas of my life. Like, I didn't get bogged down in things so much.
Yeah.
I was able to stay positive more. I was able to say, okay, this is a bad day, but tomorrow's going to be better, and I think I gave myself a little more grace, to say, you know what, some days you're just not okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay. You just don't be okay today, but you got to get out of bed tomorrow. You got to get moving. My health did get better, and I don't know if it was anything, specific to that, or it was just my mindset.
The brain can
changed.
heal. The brain can heal.
Yeah. And a lot of anybody with an autoimmune disease can tell you that if you don't stay positive, you may as well give up, because you do have to just gotta keep rolling.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had any dreams that reminded you of that event? Not necessarily like reliving it or re-seeing it, but is there any, have you ever had any, I guess what I'm getting at is, have you ever had anything that you would consider a visit into your mind to kind of corroborate that sighting?
I haven't really, but something I do think that when something does happen now, where I feel like, okay, I got to kick myself in the pants,
Mm-hmm.
and get my head out of my ass and, just, do something. I do think about it. Like, I do think about it and say, okay, now, just you gotta feel the same way you did then, just keep moving, keep putting one foot in front of the other and just keep going.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've had anything, as far as a dream or anything like that. But I think it, I do think about it still. I think about it all the time.
It's amazing how things like that can affect a person for the
Yeah.
rest of their life. I mean, I talked recently with a gentleman who saw what he believed to be 3 Bigfoot. And to his best estimate, maybe 20 to 24 seconds
Wow.
that he witnessed these. About 800 yards away. I'm sorry, about 850 feet away. So a good distance. Literally changed his life. Changed the path that he was on. And he's not looked back since. 20 seconds.
Yeah, and that's, you read and you see all these different things, and there's a lot of people who have like a really, and I know some people's experiences are very negative, but then, even sometimes people that have a negative experience, they can still pull a positive out of it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing, when something that you're like, I don't even know if I believe in this, and then all of a sudden, it's there in front of you and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I do now.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. Do you follow UFO culture now?
I do. Yeah, there's, I listen to obviously your podcast, and I
Thank you.
listen to a lot of other, podcasts too. I think
Wait
it's
a
really
minute.
interesting.
What do you mean you listen to a lot of?
You're just my favorite.
You don't have any reason to listen to anybody else.
There's only you, Eric. There's only you.
Yeah, that's funny. Like when you hear about the things that are going on within the government, as far as disclosure with the Senate committees and the congressional hearings and the task forces that are being created and all this, I have a horrible time trying to imagine or believe that our government hasn't been aware of these things all along. But let's just say that they're telling the truth and they didn't know about this until 2017. Does any of what you hear within this disclosure community, does it resonate with you, or are you left kind of scratching your head saying, that's not really what I feel like I saw, or I didn't.
I feel like there's a lot of, there's like a camp that says, it's all bad and evil, and they're, they're going to invade us, kill us, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, and then there's another, thing that says, no, everything is, roses and sunshine and everything's okay. And it's like, it seems like there's so many different variations on what's going on. And, is it all related? Is it all not? And then there's a lot of people, that just want to hype it up and, want you to be afraid of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. And I kind of like, okay, whatever. Or somebody that claims to have all the answers,
Run away.
Yes, exactly. I'm just like, I'm telling you, I saw this and I still don't understand it. Like I said, I'm not writing a book and I'm not starting a cult. So, I don't think, even if somebody does have some information, I don't think they have all the answers. I don't think anybody has all the answers.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Well, Trisha, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I was thrilled to hear that you listened to the show, obviously. And I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story with the listeners. Very interesting.
Thanks so much.
Talk about an experience that I guess you would say is ultimately benign. You just sat there in wonderment and didn't have any negative things. You weren't scared. You weren't running for the hills. You didn't. I think sensationalism, even in some guests that come on podcasts, I think that, and I said this before, even about people who have assumed that they've had a Bigfoot experience. It may just be a noise in the woods, or it may just be, a shadow or whatever. But, sometimes those are, to me, the more intriguing ones than somebody that comes on and says, I've been investigating Bigfoot for 3 months now, and I've had 6 sightings. And, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You got guys out there that's been doing this for 40 and 50 years, and they don't have that many sightings. So, no, I'm sorry, but you didn't. You're sensationalizing. I'm not taking away from the fact that you may have had an experience, but let that experience be enough.
Yeah.
You're not coming on here telling me you saw this ball of plasma and then now all of a sudden everything that happens after we die. You didn't get all the answers to everything in the world. So, and to me, that's a much more interesting kind of account. I think it lets your mind have to do some work and think about, just what could it have been, and it's interesting. Well, I'm glad that you found Chris Bledsoe's book.
Yeah, so am I. It was able to, to at least let me know that other people, have had something similar happen.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Keep listening.
Oh, thanks, Eric.
I got more great stuff coming. And you take care. If you have any more sightings, please make sure to let us know.
I will.
All right.